Hi everyone, I'm Brian with Obedia and PC Audio Labs. Today I'm going to show you how to make use of the new Chord Track in PreSonus Studio One version 4 and how you can make use of its harmonic editing functions on audio and instrument tracks in Studio One. Now if you'd like to learn this feature in depth with a professional digital audio trainer, give us a call at Obedia and you can work one-on-one with us to learn this and many more features and functions inside of Studio One in real time. Now, what is the Chord Track? The Chord Track is a global track that we have access to in Studio One. And when I say global, I mean a track that is going to apply its settings and effects to the entirety of my Studio One song. It's very much like the Arranger track, which I've talked about in previous videos. The Arranger track is showing right here up in the top of my Studio One song that I'm currently working on. But I haven't yet opened up the Chord Track, so I'm going to open the Chord Track. And the Chord Track, as I was saying, because it's a global track, what I apply to my Chord Track will be applied to the entirety of my song. What can I apply to the Chord Track? Well, as the name implies, I can apply chords to the Chord Track, and those chords will then in real time affect the harmonic playback of my song. It'll affect the tone, and it'll affect how the song plays back and how it sounds. It's really useful for being able to try out different creative functions, different sounds, different chords, etc., different melodies inside of Studio One and in your Studio One song. So let's talk about how we make use of it. First of all, we need to open the Chord Track. As I have done, it is empty and there is no data in it right now. And we will have some data in just a moment. Before I show you how we're going to do that, let's talk about one important thing that you need to do. You can add some data to the Chord Track if you would like, just the same as you add data to the Arranger track. You can double click, and when you double click, you'll have a new chord created. That chord will, in this case, just be the default C major. And if I right click on it, I can see that information right here. I can see that it has got a root of C, and it is a major key. That chord that I've entered isn't actually going to do anything right now to my music. So I have just gone ahead and isolated some music from one of the Studio One demo songs that comes with Studio One version 4. And this is so that I have some audio that I can play back for you guys. I'm focusing just on the electric guitar, the bass, lead vocals, and some keys. Those keys are being played through the Presence XT virtual instrument. And the reason I'm keeping it simple is so that we don't get too lost in the weeds. We're only covering the basics here in order to get you into using the Chord Track. So here's that audio.
What can make your body fall into a groove?
Pretty straightforward. I've got my guitar, my bass, my keys, my vocals. They're all active right here in my song, but I'm not yet processing any of these with the Chord Track. And that's because there's a few things that I need to do before the Chord Track is going to be active and start actually processing the audio in my Studio One song. So I'm going to delete this chord that I've entered because I don't really need that right now. I want to make use of some of the wizardry in Studio One that's going to allow me to find out what the chords are that are being played in my audio and then apply those to the Chord Track. And I'll show you how that is going to be done. I'm going to go ahead and click on this electric guitar track that I have right here and then expand the inspector on the left-hand side. And if I take a look at the inspector, I have a couple functions that are very important to take control of and start using. That option that I will start with is follow chords, and that option is generally turned off by default when you start. But you can change that by simply clicking on the pull-down menu and selecting from some of the different follow chord options. Now each of these options is going to cause for the audio to play back a little bit differently. It's a bit like time stretching your audio. If you've ever done time stretching, you've seen some of my other videos on how to time stretch audio in Studio One. Time stretching allows us to actually affect how it is that audio plays back in real time in order to cause it to conform to a grid, to tempo changes, as we were talking about with the tempo track and things along those lines. So each of these different modes will essentially affect the audio a little bit differently. You'll want to play with these to see which works best for the audio that you're working with. Typically, you can go ahead and go with parallel, which is a great default option to use in chord editing and in the Chord Track. Next, we'll go down and we'll take a look at the tune mode, and this will have a default option as well. I had previously selected the option for guitar, so I can go ahead and select guitar if I don't have guitar selected. So I can go through and I can do that for each of my tracks now. I'm going to click on the bass. Again, the bass I have set to parallel and I have set to bass guitar. And then I can look down and I can click on my lead vocals. And my lead vocals follow chords is enabled for parallel. And I'm going to leave tune mode set to default for right now. And then finally, I should mention that with instrument parts, MIDI parts, you're going to notice when I click on my instrument track that I have less options than I had for the audio track previously, especially under the follow chords option here, where I only have parallel, narrow, and bass. So a little less functionality there. And the reason for that is essentially just that we already have a lot of our note data included in this MIDI that we're working with. This MIDI data right down here actually is made up of nothing but notes. So therefore, I can see chords that already exist inside of this MIDI data. So I don't need to break this down to its molecular level as much, but I do need to do that on audio data. So I need to be a little more selective about how it is that I'm doing it. So that said, I have opted to follow chords on my electric guitar track and on my other tracks, and I have set my tune modes as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the chords that were played in theory on this piece of music. The first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to right-click on my electric guitar, and I'm going to look down at the audio menu and then look over to the pop-out menu that comes out from that. And here I have a new section. This is new in Studio One version 4, and it's labeled Chords. And underneath it I have Detect Chords, Remove Chords, Extract a Chord Track, and Apply Chords from Chord Track. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Detect Chords. When I click on Detect Chords, Studio One is going to use its little bit of wizardry and mastery of technology here to go in and work to figure out what chords have been played. So now you're going to notice that underneath these transients and underneath these events that I have right here in the guitar, I now have some newly created chords. Now, if I know my audio that I have recorded, if I know what it is that I have played, I will probably know what chords it is that were played. And so if I know that maybe these are a little bit off or something along those lines, I can double click on that audio region, and then I can go into the music editor, the audio editor, and here I'll be able to take a closer look at my chords that have been discovered by Studio One. Now, if I think that maybe these are not correct, I can double click on one of these and I can open my chord selector. And in the chord selector, I have the option to, from a circle of fifths, select the chord that I would like to apply to that chord. So when I do that, I will now have a new chord that has been applied to the chord track right here. Now, I may not necessarily know what it is that I played right offhand, but I might be able to just feel it musically. And if that's the case, I can use this cool option right here, which is instrument input. And instrument input, when it is enabled, means that I can play on my MIDI controller. And right there, I now have played a C, and I'm hearing that C a little bit because I'm also playing my virtual instrument that is loaded. But I played a C, and therefore I have now played a C directly into the chord selector. That C note is, C chord, should I say, is now registered into my chord track. So there's two different ways that I can edit the chords as a result. And if I maybe am not getting to where I want to be, I can just undo what it is that I have just done and go back to what it is that Studio One found. Now, I can also adjust how these chords play, when they start, when they stop, and etc. So, for instance, if I take a look right now, I can see that Studio One managed to start this first chord pretty much just on top of the beginning of this audio event right there on the transient. I can adjust its length and its start point a little bit though, and I can do that for its ending point. And I can also do that here for when the next chord would be starting, and I can go through and I can do that bit by bit. I can play with this a little bit in order to see if I can get this just right. And specifically, I want to see if I can get my chords to sit on top of the transients and on top of transients in some fashion or another. So I want to see if I can get that correct. And in some cases, I may know that, okay, I missed a little bit here, or maybe something else is being played. So I could dial this back, and then I could go in and I could double click to create a new chord, just as I was showing earlier in my then empty chord track. And I could double click. I could then move this chord if I wanted to. Double click on that chord, enter a new chord for it, move it around, get it to just the right point, and then continue to do the same for other pieces of audio, other transients, other events inside of my audio. So this is something that could be a little time consuming, but Studio One's pretty smart, and it's generally going to work this out fairly automatically. But let's say that I'm not really getting to where I want to get to with this piece of audio, and I'm not really finding the chords that I want to find. Maybe in that case, I want to go ahead and use a different track in order to see if I can find the chords. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that what I'm working to do here is to use a piece of audio data that I think has the chord and the note data on it that is going to best match what it is that I am playing in my song, because later on I'm going to use that data to apply to my global chord track. I'll show that to you in just a moment. So if maybe the guitar is not necessarily getting that for me, I'm going to right click, go to audio, select the option remove chords. Now all this is non-destructive. Everything that I'm doing is not doing anything to my original recorded audio. So don't worry about hurting anything that you have recorded or anything along those lines. You're going to be safe. Your audio is going to be safe. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the keys that I have right here. And the reason for that is that the keys are very simply just pure note data. Again, if I double click on this, this is pure note data. It's MIDI data, and it's going to show me immediately things such as the chords that I have right here inside of the note data. Now, I don't need to detect chords on my musical instrument part that I have right here. If you right click, you're going to notice that there isn't anything under instrument parts which specifically says detect chords, but there is an option for extract to chord track. And so what this will do is this will extract this data directly from this instrument track, this instrument part that I'm working with, and it's going to extract this onto my chord track. So you can see now all of that chord data is now right up here on my chord track. And when I click onto the chord track on the left-hand side, when I click on one of those chords on the left-hand side under my inspector, I will see all of the other chords that were discovered by Studio One from this instrument part that I chose to export its chords to the chord track from. Now, I can also do this with other pieces of audio and other regions inside of my Studio One song. So I don't necessarily have to use the instrument track. I could use some audio data. So I could right click on, again, let's say the guitar, and scroll down, go to the audio menu, and here underneath audio, I can select the option extract to chord track. Now when I click on that, Studio One's going to take a little bit longer to sort this out. Does it pretty quickly though. And now it's gone through and it's worked to find the chords in my guitar that was recorded in my Studio One song and apply those chords to the chord track. So now those chords are shown right up here. Again, I can double click on them. I can change them with the chord selector. I can change their length. And I can also, if I right click on these chords, I can transpose them as well. I can clear my chord track. I can transpose them if I would like. I can cut, copy, and delete. So I have all of my regular editing functions right here. Specifically, I have access to transpose chord. So now that I've done that, let's go ahead and isolate just the guitar. And we're going to listen to it as we play it back. Okay, so now in real time, while my audio is playing back, I'm going to go ahead and change my chord. I'm going to go ahead and transpose, and we'll transpose this up by, let's say, 5 semitones. Okay, and so we can hear that happening in real time. Okay, and there's that first part. Now we'll go ahead and turn this, we'll A/B this on and off so we can hear the difference. So you can hear the difference there as these chords are applied to the audio that is playing back. And the reason that these chords are being applied is, again, I have opted to engage the option here on my guitar track for follow chords parallel. If I were to turn this off, then my guitar would not be affected, even though my chord track is turned on. You notice nothing is happening. So I need to make sure that I have the follow chords option enabled on any of the tracks that I would like to actually follow my chord track and get that effect of the chord track on those tracks. So now I would want to experiment and make sure that I have the proper chords laid out for each of my musical parts in my song. I have chords applied all across the chord track. And one of the cool things that I can also do here is I can opt to select only specific chords that are active in my song. So I can right-click on, let's say, the E7 that I have right here, the E major 7. I can right-click on it, I can select the option, select all E major 7 chords. Now what's going to happen is every single one of those is going to be selected in my song. Now if I want to change just those selected chords that I've selected, I can just double-click on that first one that I had right-clicked on previously, and then I can select to change the chord. Now if I do that, all of those chords are going to change to whatever chord it is that I set here inside of the chord selector in Studio One. So that's an incredibly cool feature and a great time saver. Now I can also select all of the chords that have been found in the chord track by holding Shift and double clicking. And when I double click, all of the chords will be selected. And now I could delete all of them, or I could, for instance, I could change all of them. I could transpose them if I wanted to. I've applied the chords from the guitar track to the chord track, but what if I want for all of these chords to then be applied to the rest of the audio that is playing back here inside of Studio One? Well, if I want to do that, what I need to do is I need to make sure that I apply the chords from the chord track to the other audio regions that I have active in Studio One. So I'm going to right-click on my next audio region down in the list here. I'm going to go to Audio, and then again, taking a look at that menu that I was looking at earlier just under Chords, I'm going to use the option for Apply Chords from Chord Track. Now this will apply the chords from my chord track to this audio region that I'm working with. And I can repeat that process. I could do this singly. I could do this in multiples by selecting multiples. I'm going to do Apply Chords from Chord Track. So now I've applied the chords from my chord track to all of my audio regions in my song. And remember, the instrument parts that I'm working with, these are going to change automatically. So let's say that I right-click here and I select the option for transpose chords, and I opt to go up by 5 semitones. You're going to notice that the instrument part just now adjusted itself ever so slightly, and I will undo that to show you. And there it is, having been undone. So the instrument parts are going to follow along automatically. They are pure note data. And if I were to disable the option for follow chords on any of these tracks, then those tracks would not follow along with the chord track. And so if I were to turn that off again, the effects just would not be there, and that's how I can separate tracks up and keep the chord track from affecting some of these tracks. So now that I've done all of that, I can begin the process of playing around and starting to play with the chord track inside of my song.
Your body all into a groove. What can make you really shake?
We're going to go ahead and select all of these chords, and let's go ahead and just transpose just for fun.
What can make you move? What can make your body all into
So I can see that that definitely changed the playback. I'll undo that and go back.
What can
I can change just specific chords if I want to. Let's play around a little bit here. And then just play back again.
What can make your body all into a groove? What can make you really shake and make you move?
So So it's getting a little bit crazy up in here, obviously, and you would want to keep in mind the important parts of your song, obviously the sonic characteristics, the key that you're working in, notes, making sure that things don't sound too off the wall, unless, of course, that's your goal, and that's okay if that's fine. But the beauty is all of this is non-destructive. Remember, I can just undo anything that I've done here, and it won't have any future effect on my song. I can change it. And I can also extend a chord to extend over one large piece of my song.
What can make your body fall into a groove? What can make you really shake and make you move?
So this allows me to just on the fly be able to make all kinds of changes to my song. Again, I can rearrange, I can play around a little bit. I can add new chords if I would like. I can double click those chords to change the key and the other characteristics. And because nothing is destructive, I'm not going to worry about losing anything in my song. And there's one last thing I should mention, and that's that it can be a little hard to find some of this chord data from vocal tracks. So you're probably not going to use a vocal as your root track to find your chord data most of the time. You'll probably want to use, as I say, an instrumental track of some kind or another. I think that one of the easiest ways that you could do this, again, would be to use an instrument track and select the option Extract to Chord Track. After I had extracted that chord data to my chord track, I could just apply that chord data to my other tracks that I wanted to be affected and then just turn on Follow Chords, and I'm good to go. So there you have it, everyone. That's a look at the new chord track in PreSonus Studio One 4. Hope you guys found it useful. If you have questions or comments, please get in touch with us at Obedia. Work one-on-one with a professional digital audio trainer just like myself. Tame your technology. That's what we do best at Obedia. As always, guys, I'm Brian. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time, and take care.
Today's pro audio hardware and software can give you excellent results if you know how to use it properly. Obedia can help you to get the most out of your pro audio hardware and software. Why spend your time scouring the internet for answers or digging through manuals? With one quick call to an Obedia technician, you'll be connected with someone who can give you the answers that you need in real time via phone and remote desktop. Obedia technicians are trained in all major digital audio applications on Mac, PC, iOS, and Android devices. Obedia member subscriptions are cost-effective, give you great member benefits, and Obedia is here 7 days a week to help you get the most out of your digital audio hardware and software. No matter what your level of expertise, Obedia can help you to stay focused and productive and get your music back on track. Start taming your technology today with Obedia.